It's your open source advocate, and I'm back with another video, and today we're going to talk about DD-WRT. Now, this is an open source project that has been around forever, for so long. I can't even tell you how long it's been around actually, but I have used this thing for at least 15, if not more than that, years. And it is an open source firmware that you can put on a lot of routers that are off the shelf routers. And the reason DD-WRT came to my attention in the first place was I had the original Linksys WRT54G router. If you don't know what that is, I'm probably aging myself a little bit, but this was like the router back in the day. And when you bought the Linksys WRT54G, you really got kind of the off-the-shelf home router. It didn't have a lot of power, it didn't have a lot of capability, but it was a good router. But if you really wanted to take it to the next level, you could take that thing and turn it from basically that $50 router into a $500 router just by installing DD-WRT on it and really using that to get all of the capabilities out of that hardware that Linksys was putting out. Now, Linksys is by Cisco. Cisco makes really tremendous hardware to start with, but they were using this kind of Linksys brand as kind of the home brand for the home user, but they had a lot of power inside of these machines that they were just artificially limiting with their firmware and their software, and DD-WRT really unlocked that and still today does that for a lot of this off-the-shelf hardware. So what we're going to do today is first, I'm going to show you how to get the right DD-WRT for your device, how to make sure your device is supported, how to understand how to actually put it on your device because not all devices are the same, and what the limits and restrictions and risks are of that. And then we're going to go through putting it on one of my devices here that I've got, and we'll kind of go through the interface. So this is really your intro to DD-WRT. And then in the interface, I'm going to be setting this up for my home network. So I've got several of these same routers, and I'm going to be using this as kind of quote-unquote dumb access points in the long run. But I want DD-WRT on them so that I can set that up easily and kind of manage it pretty easily as well. So we're going to get into that right after this. I just want to say thank you so much to all of my patrons over at Patreon and my subscribers on YouTube. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your support and how much I appreciate it that you enjoy my content. If you'd like to become a supporter over on Patreon, jump over to Patreon on the links in the description or the show notes. It'll give you access to my videos. You already have access through YouTube, but you're kind of dependent on YouTube's weird algorithms to kind of let you know when there's new videos, whereas Patreon's just going to let you know, hey, there's a new video posted, you should go check it out. Again, thank you so much to all my supporters. Let's get started. To get started with DD-WRT, the first thing you want to do is go to DD-WRT.com, and here's the link, and I'll have this in the show notes and the description, of course. And really you want to understand what the restrictions are, what the limitations are of any hardware you might have, and also what the risks are of trying to switch it to DD-WRT. A lot of hardware these days, it is very easy, just like the hardware that I've got that we're going to do today. But some hardware does take a little bit extra effort and maybe some kind of special connectors and things like that. And understanding that you could potentially brick your hardware, which means basically take that box and turn it into something as useful as a brick, is possible. And understanding that there are methods to unbrick hardware is also useful. I did have a Linksys that was a newer version of the WRT that had wireless in capabilities, and I bricked it the first time I tried to put DD-WRT on it, and I followed all of the instructions that they had and took a lot of patience to get the timing just right, to hit just the right thing that I needed. But I was able to unbrick that device, which was great. But understanding that there are risks whenever you do this kind of stuff is important, so I want you guys to know that. So when you come over to DD-WRT.com, there's just so many things here that you can look at, but understanding that they have tremendous documentation. Their wiki is absolutely amazing. Their forums have all kinds of question and answers. So if you've got a question that you're not sure about, check there and make sure nobody else has asked it, but look at the answers they've got. If that answer doesn't satisfy you, you can always add to that thread or create a new thread of your own. They have a frequently asked questions area that might also answer some of your questions. So really tremendous documentation that they've collected up over the years. So just be aware of that. Now, once you say, okay, I want to find out if my device is even supported, the best place you can go is the router database. So if you're on the main page, you can see at least at the time of recording, this thing is right here on the top center. Just click on router database and you're going to get this tab right here. Now it's going to be a little smaller. I've got it zoomed in for you guys. But right here you can see just this giant list of routers that are currently supported by DD-WRT. and it tells you what versions of the routers, because sometimes you get routers that come out that have multiple versions. So you want to look on your router sticker and make sure you understand what version that is, or look in your router's firmware today through the web interface or whatever you want to know about. Make sure that's a version that you have, because just because you have this router doesn't mean it's a version 1 or a version 2. It could be a version 7, and that may not be supported by DD-WRT. So it's really important for you to understand that. Now, do you want to scroll through all of these routers? Probably not. So if you said, I want to look for the Linksys AC32, that's not going to come up. But if you know that that also goes by Linksys WRT, you can look right here and you see WRT 3200 ACM. So here's Linksys, and it doesn't have a specific version number, which means either this only has a single version that's come out or all versions are supported. Again, clicking in and reading about it is going to really help you. Now, in my case, I have an Asus, and mine is a RT dash. So here's mine, which is an Asus RT AC56U. I'm going to click into it, and it'll take me to this page that kind of says, here's the versions that we have for your router. And it says, here's the DD-WRT wiki talking about it. Here's some more information on the wiki talking about this router. It kind of tells you the basics. So you have 256 megabytes of RAM. You have 128 megabytes of flash. These things are kind of important. You might have a router that only has 24 megabytes of flash and only 24 megabytes of RAM. They have very small images that will work on these routers, but sometimes that means that not everything's going to fit or everything's going to function correctly. So again, it's really important for you to go out and read these things. And then here they tell you we've got all these versions. Now, if you look, these are all beta versions, so it doesn't really matter, but I'm just going to get the newest build with the highest number. That's what they have kind of default highlighted, and then that's right here. I'm going to click on this, and it's going to come up with my normal Firefox download dialog. I'm just going to hit save. And up in the top, you can see it getting downloaded and saved and just done. So this is the best and fastest way to get this kind of hardware. Now, I want to go check out the wiki because it has flashing instructions on how to flash my router with this firmware. And it says, so they have what they call a 30-30-30 reset. On a lot of routers, they'll tell you to do a 30-30-30. That means with the router powered on, use a pencil or use whatever if it's hidden inside to press the reset button on that router, and then for 30 seconds hold it in, and while you're still holding it in, unplug the power from the router, keeping that button held in, and hold it for 30 more seconds, and then while still holding it in, plug the power back into the router. And sometimes that can be kind of tricky depending on the router, and you're trying to hold it, and you're trying to hold like a pen or a pencil or a paper clip, and you're trying to unplug a power cord that might be really stiff and then plug it back in. So be ready, kind of practice a few times before you really do it. But that's a 30-30-30 reset. That's what they're talking about here. But here they're saying for the Asus, do not do this. They're saying you should not reset this. It's an ARM router. It's got an ARM chip in it. And this Asus has a Broadcom chip in it. So another thing to understand is open-wrt is another open firmware that's free and open source, but open-wrt does not have any kind of deals with Broadcom. And Broadcom does not make open firmware. Broadcom is very proprietary. They don't like it. But DD-WRT has a deal with Broadcom to be able to use their firmware. So DD-WRT a lot of times will work with Broadcom chips. With open-wrt, you want to use more like Qualcomm, Atheros type chips, things like that. And again, open-wrt has tremendous documentation, and they have a place where you can find out if your router is supported and so on. But with DD-WRT, they have Broadcom support. That's why we're going this route with these Asus routers. But they tell you, power off the unit. Okay, it has a power button. Press and hold the WPS button. So first, I don't like WPS. I disable it on my machine, on my devices, but this is the button we're going to use to get it into the state that we want, which is basically back to factory. So you hold this WPS button, you power it on, and while you're holding that button, you'll see a little LED flashing, and then you know that this thing's going through a reset back to factory. It's very easy. I've already done it a lot of times. It's super simple. It has recovery mode flashing instructions as well. So if you get DD-WRT on this thing and you're like, man, I don't really want to use this. I want to go back to the OEM hardware or firmware. This is what these instructions are really good for. They tell you how to do this, okay? It's very important. VLAN configuration information. If you want to configure VLANs, here's the important information you need to know about how to do that. If you want to overclock this thing, here's the stuff you can do to overclock this device and make it a little bit more powerful potentially. It's very important that you understand what these numbers are, that you know where they're set. So this wiki is super, super great for doing this kind of stuff. For me, I'm going to reset this router, and then we'll log into the router UI, and we're just going to upload the new firmware. That's how easy it is on this particular device. A lot of devices allow you to do that these days, so it'll be similar for a lot of devices, but it won't be the same. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and then we'll start getting the firmware installed. Alright, I reset the router. All the little lights on the front seem to be on and ready. I have plugged in a Ethernet cable from the machine I'm using, and I've plugged it into the LAN port. So there's 5 ports on the back of this router. It's got 4 LAN ports and 1 WAN port. Right now, I'm going to use the LAN port. Doesn't matter which one you plug it into, but we're going to go and just check to see if I can get an IP address. So let me open up my network settings here. And here we've got it. You can see it says connected, so we'll just kind of check it out and see what it is. And it's a .1 address, which is what I would expect on this router. So that's good. So we're going to go open up 192, if I can type it correctly, .1.1. And here is the router startup wizard, and it's kind of small. Now I can just say manually set this thing up and skip all the baloney. It wants a password, that's fine. Just give it a password. It's going to tell me it's very weak, but I'm about to get rid of it anyways. There we go. Okay, now it's a little more happy. Yeah, I don't want to pick any of this stuff. I'm just going to leave it in router mode. Next. Internet connection require username and password. No. Next. Automatic IP, static IP, automatic IP. Next. So all these things it wants, I'm just going to leave it as is because we're about to get rid of all this stuff anyways. So I'm just running through their startup wizard. You don't have to do this on every router that's out there most of the time. And here we go. I'm going to hit complete. It's going to kind of set this thing up. Going to give me the dashboard. Now, don't misunderstand. ASUS has a nice interface, but this is not going to meet my needs today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down. I'm going to click on administration. I'm going to do firmware upgrade. So this is going to be a little different on every router, but you'll find something similar somewhere in your router as long as you can access the router as an administrative user. And I'm going to browse for the firmware file that I downloaded, and it's right here. So I'm just going to double click on it to select it, and I'm going to hit upload. Now it says, please wait applying settings. This could take a little while. It just depends. It's actually upgrading. It says it could take about 3 minutes. We'll see if it actually takes that long, but be patient. Sometimes this does take a while depending on the router. It could depend on the version of the firmware you're getting. It's just so many variables that could definitely take things. I usually like to give it about 15 minutes just because that gives it time to upgrade the firmware and then put the firmware in place. It goes through a reboot. It double checks things a lot of times. It's just, to me, that's always been a good rule of thumb is be patient, first of all. Kind of watch the lights on the front of your device, but understand that sometimes the lights don't work the same way on the device. I know for a fact on this ASUS router with DD-WRT, most of the LEDs turn on, but not all. And then with open-WRT, which will work, just not on all the features that it needs, only one LED turns on. It doesn't matter what you do. So just really depends on what you're doing with the firmware, but understand it may not look the same, but that's why I say just give it a little bit of extra time if you're not sure what it's supposed to do, and you should be able to get back to the user interface when it's done. Alright, after that finished, I got a little message that says upgrade complete, reboot the router. So I am rebooting the router currently, and we'll see if it comes up and gets running. Again, at least on the first boot, be patient. It may take a little bit more time than normal, but once everything's up and running, you should be able to access the router again at that same IP address, 192.168.1.1. If we go here and look, right now it says connecting, so we're not connected yet. So we want to wait until it says connected. We may have to turn off our communication port and turn it back on, but we'll give it a little time and see if it just says connected at some point. Alright, that took a little bit longer than I even thought, so it finally says connected, and if we check here, we can see we've got a .1 address again. So here we should be able to go to 192.168.1.1. It is not HTTPS though. There we go. Now, the first time it comes up, DD-WRT will ask you to create an administrator name and a password for the system. Let me get it typed in here. And you should use a strong password, of course. Now, when you've got everything set and ready, this is where you're going to be brought to. And they tell you, we have a Wi-Fi speed checker. I've tried to use this in the past, at least with this router, and it has not worked for me, so I don't really mess with it. And then DNS Crypt, they also say that they have. I have not tried that one yet, but it's something I might try in the future. Now, once you've seen those, you can hide that box, and you need to log in the first time, so it's going to ask you to log in. And there you go. The box gets hidden, and now you've kind of got your standard logged in administrative basic tab. Now, I like to jump over back to the main server tab and the main setup. Out of the box, you basically get a router that's going to function. The router has a name. You can give it a host name if you want to. If you want to change the IP address range, then you would just change it right here, and you would set this to something different. Now, I'm going to set this router up after a while to be just an AP, so it's not even going to do DHCP. But for now, just understand that you can do that. If this router is going to be your gateway, you can leave it and just put the same address there. And for local DNS, if you're going to use this router for DNS, then same thing, just use that. You can set up other DNS if you want to. As you move down, it's got your DHCP settings. So while this might be the router address, down here you might want to set up your DHCP to only start at 100 like they have here. So it's only going to give you 100 through 150. Now you can set this to be a larger range. You can set this to be a lower number. You know, just so many things there. You can set up your DNS for 1.1.1.1, 8.8.8.8, or your own DNS if you're running Pi-hole, and if you have a backup Pi-hole, you might want to put those in instead. You still might want to put some public DNS here just as like a third option in case those two, for whatever reason, are down. If you're using Win's service, you can set that up. I've never used it. Don't even mess with it. Everything else you would really just leave the same. You would want to set your time zone for your area where you live. Now, this one for me is America, Chicago, and it's in alphabetical order, but I don't think you can do like type to find. Maybe you can. It's been too long since I've tried it. But you would set this to wherever you are. Of course, I'm in America, Chicago. That's where I'm going to set it for me. Then you hit save. Now, save in DD-WRT is not the same as apply settings. So you can go through and make a whole bunch of changes on all these tabs and sub-tabs. When you're done, you want to hit apply changes. That's what actually makes the changes in the system and reboots the router and gets it ready for you to use the way that you've set it up. Now, once you've kind of set up the basics here on the basic setup tab, there are some other things you can set up here as well. You can do IPv6 setup. You can do DDNS setup, dynamic DNS setup if you want to. So it's right now disabled, but you see here they have dindns.org. They have a few things here. All right, my mouse battery's just died. If it wasn't for bad timing, I wouldn't have any timing. So they don't have Duck DNS here, and they don't have Cloudflare Dynamic DNS, sadly, but they do have custom, so I'm not sure exactly what you get with custom. But there you go. You can put in your DNS server, your username, your password, and see if that will function. I can't guarantee that it will, but it's something you could try so that you would have that dynamic DNS right here at the router level. They have MAC address cloning, so if you need to clone a MAC address, you can do that here. They have advanced routing, so you can go set up some advanced routing options. And you do use this like when you're setting this thing up as an AP. And again, out on the wiki for DD-WRT, there's all kinds of instructions on great things that you can do with this software. I mean, just so many different ways to do some networking setups and things like that that they've come up with and that they've set up. If you want to use it as a switch, or if you're using it as a switch, you can set that up here as well and kind of configure it. There's some pretty good tutorials online on YouTube as well about how this works. It looks a little bit weird at first when you kind of start looking at it, and understanding that different routers work a little bit differently is important. But if you look right here, you'll see that it sets up things as WAN, and then what's the LAN, and then is it 1,000, and when what's connected. This is a super useful view when you're trying to troubleshoot a connection. If you see like a really slow connection, like you're only getting 100 megabits and you know that should be a gigabit, that could tell you that something in the path is not giving you the speeds you expect and help you troubleshoot that issue at some point. Up here it tells you which basically VLANs you're using, and you can assign these things to be VLAN or WAN or none. So right now I don't have any of those things set up from the other tabs, so there's nothing showing up in the list, but you could set that up if you wanted to. Finally, under networking, you can actually see a lot of the things that are attached to this device. You can set up your bridges, and you can set up bridging between LAN devices and between those different ports, and set up VLANs and all kinds of great things to be bridged across. So it's really got some great power. And again, lots of information out there on their wiki, lots of tutorials on YouTube about how to really do this and more specifics that are out there. I'm just kind of giving you the brief overview today. And then if you want to set up any kind of tunnels, you can do that as well. The next big thing, and for me, is wireless. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to just leave this to off. But down here, I'm going to have to change this mode at some point. But for now, it's access point. And it's in mixed mode, which means BG. And I don't want that. I just want N. I don't have any G devices left anymore. Right here is the SSID that you're going to use. I'm not going to use that. So I'm going to call this test Mac G for now. And the 6 network is usually very full. So I like to drop this down to 1. And then I like to set this at 40, just to make it as wide as possible. Now there are some other settings that you can see that are set up for this, and if you go back to their wiki on this page that we looked at for flashing the router, there were some settings down here that they talked about as far as things that you could use and things that you might want to use. So be aware of that for VLAN configuration and so on. You might want to go click on those things for overclocking. So again, checking the wiki for your hardware is super important, and making sure that you've got the right information is super important. But for now, this is good. Multicast to unicast, I don't need. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save, just because I did make a change right there, and I don't want it to get reverted before I change the next one. But the next one is my 5 gigahertz radio, so it does see that, and it sees it as an AP. Right now it's set to mixed. Again, I don't want that mixed. I'm going to use that for AC only. And then right here, I'm going to give it a little bit of a different name, test Mac G. Let's see, Mac G and 5 gigahertz. How about that? Something a little bit different. The channel is auto. If you know what you're doing, you can set this channel. I'm just going to leave it on auto. That's fine for now. The width, again, I might go wider, but at this point, I'm going to go with 40. I'm not sure how that affects performance, but we can always check that out with something like iPerf or iPerf 3. Everything else here, I'm just going to leave the same. I'm not going to change anything, and I'm going to hit save again. And now we want to go to wireless security. You really want to make sure that you go set up your security if you're going to do this. And you want to use something like WPA2 PSK at the very least. And then I like to use the AES, and we're going to set a strong password here, and then save. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the other radio right here. I'm going to set it WPA2 PSK, and again AES, and a strong password, and hit save. And really, I've pretty much set up this thing to be what it needs to be. I could just hit apply settings, and all of these settings are going to be saved. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to show you that this thing shows up in my Wi-Fi system settings here. So I'm going to go to Wi-Fi. I'm going to go to my Wi-Fi settings, which opens up this window. And right here, you're going to see, right now it shows DD-WRT, but once it comes back up, it should have those new channels showing. So, in fact, if I turn this off, turn it back on here. Now you can see that my Wi-Fi has picked up on this test, and I have an in radio in this device, so it's not going to see the 5 gigahertz one, but there it is. There's test Mac G right there, the one that I set up. I could connect to it, but then I would definitely have no internet access, so probably not something. Oh, there is the 5 gigahertz, so maybe it does have AC capabilities. So yeah, so there's the 5 gigahertz band, and there's the regular wireless in capability. So everything's there. It's functioning. I can see it. I'm sure I could connect to it, and if I had it directly connected to my internet, I could basically get internet as well. Now this creates a single access point. What I'm wanting to do is not use the DHCP functions inside of this router. I want to use the DHCP functions inside of pfSense And I really want this just to be an access point that gets me through to pfSense, so whether it's wireless or wired. So I need to go through and set that up, and I'm going to go look at the wiki and the instructions out there for DD-WRT to do that, and I'll get that set up, and we'll do that on another video. This has been DD-WRT. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's really a basic overview of some of the things you can do. It's got some really cool features, so if you haven't checked it out before, you definitely should go do that. If you go check out the status page, one of the things I think you'll like is that you can look at the LAN and you can kind of see what's getting connected to the device. Now right now I only have one machine connected. You can look at the WAN and you can even see traffic graphs of what's going on in your wide area network. Of course right now I don't have a wide area network connected, but normally you could see what's happening with all of your bandwidth traffic going through there. You can check out your wireless, and again you can see what wireless devices are connected. So I really like this feature because it makes it easy to find those devices that are connecting up to my system. You can look at your bandwidth graphs here for your different interface types. You can see the bandwidth graphs, and right here you can see the local area network and what that bandwidth graph look like. And again, if you're looking at LAN, you can kind of see what's going on there. So I like that. It's pretty great. You can see your system log. So if you need to get any system logs, you can do that. Right now it's not enabled, but you can enable it so that you can get system logs out if you need to. And then system information. Again, they're showing you about the Wi-Fi speed checker. You can just hide that box if you don't want to see it. And then you get this system information, which is kind of where we started whenever we first logged into the system. So you get this nice system information overview here of what's going on the system. You can see devices that are connected on the wireless. You can see devices that are DHCP clients as well. So a really nice way to kind of see this and see what's going on. Just to mention, they do have a way to support this if you want to donate through PayPal. So pay attention to that, because a lot of these open source projects really just run on donations. And this is one, like I said, that's been around for years and years and years, and has consistently kept up and consistently given more capabilities to more routers as they come out. And their ability to buy those routers and work on them is really volunteer as far as I know. They don't get given these routers by the manufacturers to say, hey, try to make DD-WRT work on it. No. They just get them, or they have somebody donate them, or they have somebody donate money so they can go buy them and try to support those routers. So if you would like to give back, do that as well. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it so they can come along on the journey with us, and I'll talk to you next time.